Hi. Uh, our topic is Madras, Chennai, the spirit of a city. So, of course, we begin with a cricket analogy. The two ladies sitting on either side of me are all-rounders in an incredible sense, because on stage right now, I kind of lower the tone a little bit. On stage right now, we have a novelist, poet, a politician, one who has started a new party, an IAS officer, and someone who's made a film which has won the President's Medal. I'm speaking of just one person, Sivakami, who's on my left here. On my right is another all-rounder who began as a banker and is a writer whose book we shall be discussing later, a marvelous book on Chennai, and a dancer, a Bharatanatyam dancer, Tulsi Badrinath. And last and certainly the least, I am the editor of the Wisdom India Almanac and a contributing editor of the Hindu. So now that, thank you, that's nice. Now that we've got that out of the way, the idea that the floods were nature's fury and that there was loss of life and property because, well, that's how nature is, has been given a lot of credence in Tamil Nadu and beyond, because it's a convenient answer, it's a convenient response to something like that. But of course, the event of course is nature's, there's no doubt about that, but the consequences are man-made. And this is something that has a lesson not just for Chennai, not just for Tamil Nadu, but also for the rest of India. And it's something that we need to look at more carefully. Why the floods? Why the floods? Perhaps the most important reason are the decisions by the vested interests, the town planners, the bureaucrats, and the politicians. Sivakami will detail that a little more as we go along. There have been, for example, the Corporation of Chennai itself, for example, has encroached upon something like 6 kilometers of roads, of illegal roads, at or near the high tide line within the Chennai city limits. And once you say that, there's very little further to be added to that. So the body that's supposed to look after the city itself has been encroaching, and that's terrible. There's the Pallikarai marshland which drained water from, it was about 250 square kilometers, the catchment area. It was supposed to drain water from that area. It is now 4.3 square kilometers. There's something that these figures tell us, and that the rains happened, yes, the rains happened year after year after year, but there's something that went wrong this time. It was almost as if we were preparing for disaster rather than preparing to avoid the disaster. Also, there's a question of communication. There's a question that has been a part of many disasters in India from the Bengal famine in the 30s, in that there is a problem of communication. The agents are too many and varied and don't talk to each other, and the person who's supposed to coordinate, or the person who's supposed to ensure that disasters are taken care of before they happen, has told the media a marvelous quote, which is one of the saddest things to emerge from the whole thing, from the official side. He says, "I am not allowed to speak to the media," which means that when there is a disaster about to happen, he keeps quiet because he's not allowed to speak to the media. There was, of course, the release of the water from the Chembrambakam reservoir into the Adayar River, and although the first warnings were issued at the end of November, 28th of November to be exact, and the International Weather Bureau had forecast 500 millimeters of rain, the same Chief Secretary has then defended his action, saying that they didn't say that there would be very, very heavy rain. They just said that there would be very heavy rain. Of course, that's his excuse. So these are the man-made elements that have contributed to the flood. But what is more important from the point of view of what we are discussing today is what happened after the floods and how the people of a city came together and how it is important to understand that it's fine to have in place a lot of cosmetic changes, a lot of the development of the city as it happens can cause a lot of harm unless you are very conscious of what you are doing. And the book that Tulsi has written, which is called Madras, Chennai and the Self, draws a bridge between the Madras, which was the earlier state, the city called Madras, the British name, which was then changed to Chennai, and somewhere along the line, how Madras and Chennai differed from Chennai, and why it is that Chennai has suffered, and will continue to suffer because of a certain mindset that is in the city. And we'll come to that and discuss that in some detail. I'd just like to finish by this introduction about the floods with a quote from S. Janakirajan, the professor of the Madras Institute of Development Studies, who said that what happened was a major goof up. There were accurate warnings of consistent and heavy and very heavy rainfall on at least 2 days before the rain started. Moreover, after the goof up was exposed, we couldn't access the Metro Water data from the first week of December. And then she says, the data remains inaccessible. So you see there's a whole lot of things playing into the floods. And before we get to discuss that in some detail and how it affected the two ladies sitting here, who of course are both from Chennai, I think I will start by asking Tulsi to read a couple of passages from her book, and then we'll connect it up.
Can you hear me? Is this working? All right. Maybe just a light para for my book, since we're talking about such a heavy topic actually. And Sivakami, who's here, she's part of my book as well, and she liked this passage, so I'm going to read it out to you. I have a friend in Madras who inherited a 100-year-old factory that manufactures snuff. And he's got a problem because his clientele is dwindling day by day, and yet he has a tradition, he has a heritage of a 100-year-old factory that he doesn't know whether to keep going or not. But let's look at how his day begins. Every morning, dutifully, Saravana Shaktivel performs a pleasurable rite in the private space of his bathroom. Uncapping a small tin cylinder, he takes a good pinch of the pale brown powder inside and, conveying it to his nostril, inhales briskly. Almost immediately, his eyes start to water and he braces himself for the peppery hit. Earlier he would sneeze, but now his nose is accustomed to this daily assault. By the time he has finished bathing, a thick brown mucus is flowing out of it. For the next half an hour, as he emerges freshly dressed, there's a pleasant buzz in his head. Do you think we should?
No, we'll
talk
go
now,
in and out, yes, that's
don't want
nice.
to bore this audience.
Many years ago, during one of the floods in Chennai, and according to stats that I recently found, it may have, in fact, the actual rain may have been more than fell at this time. I remember I was working in Chennai, then I was in the Indian Express, and going home in the rain, and as I started walking and approached my place, which was a few kilometers away, the water had kept rising and it was up to my neck. And I could see that there were a few others, some urchins, some men trying to walk, some women trying to walk the same road, and it was becoming increasingly difficult. And somehow, spontaneously and without any word exchanged, all of us, maybe 8 or 9 of us, held hands across the waters and sort of walked each other to safety as one might perhaps with ropes on a hill climb the hill. So there's something about the way we react to a disaster, the way we react to, which is obviously divorced from who you are, what you do, and how things have been, and who's at fault. You just spontaneously react, and this has been one of the things that has been the hallmark of the floods here floods in Chennai, in that people have reacted spontaneously. People have had those who have lost life and have lost property go into and live in their houses. My friend Vishwanathan Anand, for example, who's a grandmaster chess player, he just took in people into his house from around the surrounding areas, which I think was a marvelous thing, and he was not the only one. A whole lot of people had done that. So I want to ask, starting with Sivakami, how did the floods affect you personally, and what was your experience?
Yeah, the floods did affect me personally, but before that I would like to say something about the book. The book Madras, Chennai and the Self is a very unique book that I have read, because usually the travel writers, when they write about the cities, they list the hotels, eating joints and places to see and something about the people. And but Tulsi Badrinath has traveled far and wide, and she reveals the city through personalities and people, and also tries to discover the soul of Chennai. It has inspired me in several ways. First of all, I try to dream about a city as such. Usually because I come from a village, I used to have a dream about my village. Because in the present setup, the temple is the center of the village. A great writer, Charu Nivedita from Tamil Nadu, is sitting in the first row. He would agree with me that every village, the temple will be the heart of the village, and all the streets will be arranged in a hierarchical order, caste hierarchical order, and on the outskirts of it there will be the Dalit village. So now I come from a Dalit village, so I dream about a village where everybody live mixed, and the heart of the town is not the temple, but it's a huge library where everybody has access, and the well laid out streets, and also a park. And I dream about a women playground, because no village has a women playground as such, and women have forgotten to play after their marriage. So really, because since I have experienced, I want to share my opinions on that. And also I visualize a work shed for women, because when two women meet, obviously they gossip, but 20 women gather together, and if you offer them a mic, they really talk good stuff, like politics and change, and how to rear children, and share other things also. So a work shed is a good thing. They work, and they speak, and they share, and they do also politics. So I've been dreaming about a village, but after I read Tulsi Badrinath, I started dreaming about a city. When I went to Delhi and I went to Nehru Park, because I used to stay in Tamil Nadu house, and I go to because there are a lot of good flowers during the season, and I found some men, lying about with their hand and legs spread. So I thought I'll also try that. So I laid flat with my arms open, and some time I think I fell asleep. Then suddenly I woke up, somebody was peeping to me. So I got so scared. I said, is anything wrong with you? The person asked me. No, I'm all right, I said. So after that I never would try. So I would like a place where the women could loiter about, and there are some public spaces, because all the public spaces are occupied by men. Go to the pub, they are there. Everywhere they are there, and women entering a pub is a taboo, of course, even now. But I am not asking for a pub, but I am asking for a public space for women. And I imagine myself standing in a bus stop, doing nothing, and also eating groundnuts one by one like the men do. But I couldn't do it, but I try sometimes. So now after reading her book, then I started dreaming about my city. A city should be, because I have lived in a university campus where the city also surrounding. So I like a university at the center and all the shopping malls and other things go by, and also your gym and walk space and a park, garden, and each locality, because every city has lot of focal points. For example, in Chennai, Saidapet, Alvarpet, different what do you call it, small towns. So each town should have this concept. But I talked to a writer while I was coming, boarding the bus. He's from England. So I asked him, what do you write about? He said, he shocked me. So I don't write anything about the past, I write about the future. Then he asked me back, what do you write about? So I was so feeling shy that I'm only writing my past. But we have the roots. So how to change is a preoccupation. So how to change it? So after reading Badrinath's book, I really felt that a lot of changes required, because she laments about the loss of a library and the survival of the medical shops. So there are a lot of interesting things in the book I talked about. And coming to the floods, he said that the chief secretary was not allowed to kind of conduct a press meet, and it's my experience also, but I won't go in detail. I will simply say that when I started writing government in my records, I would be always confused whether I should use government has or government have. So my superiors used to correct me, government is a plural concept, so you write have. But come to think of it, it's a singular concept, it's only Jayalalitha and nobody else. So nowadays I write government has only, because only she. Nobody is allowed to talk on behalf of government. So now I will, the floods had affected me personally, in the sense because everybody suffered from bottom. I suffered from the top because my terrace was leaking. The excess water flowing into my first floor, all my electric wires had gone and I had to repair. It is a great leveler, I found. Why I say leveler, I'm not happy that everyone is suffering. And in the literature, you know, people say Dalits only cannot write Dalit literature, everybody can write. Okay, you write, go ahead, write, who's stopping. But only when people get affected, then you can solicit cooperation of everyone. That was what happened. If only the poor got affected, no rich people would have come and helped them. But everyone was affected, then they knew what is the suffering, whether it is God-given or the self-made. If you go into detail, it is all self-made, because all the catchment areas have been stopped by illicit or illegal constructions. Therefore, the rain did not spare any of us, so everybody suffered. Therefore, I feel it's it applies. Two things I've learned. One is a personal experience really does matter in literature or otherwise also. And secondly, it is it's a high time that we realize that it's only personal experience should matter, because knowing about it, learning about it should also matter, because we received a lot of funds from abroad. They have sent, and we are still recovering from the recent floods.
That's true. The book, coming back to the book, the question, many years ago, Naipaul had said that his way of writing a book like this about a country or a state or a community is, he says, I throw hooks into my subject and write about whatever comes up with it. And what Tulsi has done here is that she has spoken to a whole lot of people in Chennai, and people who have been in Chennai for years, people who see Chennai as it was some decades ago, and people who have a vision for Chennai, but somehow are not able to pull it together because of various objections, various hazards that we spoke about earlier. What part of the book? Because a lot of the people who are represented in the book, including Sivakami, have have a wonderful feel for the city. You must have a feel for the city if you're going to write about it. So what is your connection in that psychological sense with your city? And how did it manifest itself in the book?
That's a long answer, I think. If
we are here till tomorrow.
Well, my connection with this city is interesting because I'm sort of an example of national integration. My grandparents were half Gujarati and half Maharashtrian, and my father was from UP. And he was also in the IAS, he was posted in Tamil Nadu. So I was born in Madras. So in being born there, I consider myself a Madrasi. But I was also aware that there is this pejorative use of the word in the north. And growing up without any community or relatives, I sensed myself to be different because how do we understand the social structure in India? It is through the family, it is through community, and I seem to be singular in this sense that I just had a father and a mother in a city, but we had no relatives and we had no community members there, but we had lots of friends. So that perspective of being an outsider has, I think, helped me in writing this book. I also learned dance from the age of 8. And interacting with people in the school that my gurus ran, again was an immersion in a sort of culture that I entered. It wasn't mine to begin with. So all these experiences sort of led to making me the writer I am. About the spirit of the city and the sense of the city, I think if there's one thing about Madras, it's that the people there, they don't show off. If we have a Bombay culture and a Delhi culture, then the culture of Madras is you could be someone who is very wealthy or someone who has, achieved a lot in life. But if you looked at them, there's no attempt to sort of broadcast that sense of being somebody. So to be modest in Chennai is to be cool. So all of you who go there, just tone it down a bit. And that's something very endearing about the city. And if you don't understand that, when you go there, you could say, oh, there's nothing happening here. Boring yaar, kuch nahi hota hai yahan pe. But बहुत कुछ हो रहा है. But that जो बहुत कुछ हो रहा है, it's inside homes, it's inside private spaces where people interact with each other. And maybe it's not about the pubs or the happening streets. The other thing that I tried to bring into focus here was that there's a kind of dichotomy between Madras, which is considered the past, the old city, and Chennai, which is supposed to be hip and happening. But actually, if you study the history of the city, Madras came into being when two British gentlemen set off on a ship. They were hunting for a place where they could source cheap fabric to send back for the East India Company, and they got a grant of land which was just 100 square yards, and they got a grant for land. They had the right to stamp coins, and they built this little area which is called the Fort St. George, which was only 100 square yards, and the beginning of the city of Madras as such was just that 100 square yards of land. But as their power grew, and indeed Madras was where much of the roots of the British organization and administration, what they left behind, those beginnings can be seen in Madras. So as their power and influence grew, the city also grew and expanded beyond the first 100 square yards. In that sense, Madras was what was hip and happening then. That's where we had people coming from outside. That's where we had intermingling of cultures. In the fort itself, you had Armenians, people from French traders, and then you had the Indian traders who lived side by side in what was called Black Town, providing all the services for these people. So already there we have a kind of a global interchange, if you will.
Yeah, that's quite true, because what we were discussing this earlier, in Chennai, you can see the sort of past, present, and future sort of coexist at the same time,
Yeah.
which is a bit like, I think, India as a country, India as a nation, because I'm sure that if you thought about it, you could have a kind of Madras, Chennai, and the self kind of book, Bombay, Mumbai, and the self, or
Any city.
Bangalore, Bengaluru, and the self, because I think this is a kind of a thing across the country where you have the nostalgia on the one hand, and the sort of longing for the future as against the longing for the past in sort of some kind of fusion and collision. So you worked in Delhi, you worked around the country, you worked abroad. How does that sort of fit in with this concept? How would it be in the other cities? Do you think that there is this kind of a collision?
Yeah, I lived in the city of Tokyo for about 3 years, and I always say to people that Japan is heaven on earth, especially for women, because the safety of women is ensured. So somebody said that he goes for a night walk, and I also tried after dinner, and I came back home at 5 in the morning. Of course, I was scared, but there was no one to scare me. So the same thing you cannot do in any city or any village in India. So how to bring about safety is the prime issue of, I think, a city in India, one. Secondly, I find what is common in all the cities in India, they think these poor people are somebody who are not wanted inside the city. That's a government approach. What they do is they bring all the workers from villages, they construct all their houses and tall buildings and offices and railways and everything, and after some time they are thrown back, outside the city limits. As long as they are needed, they are housed in the Kuvam river or any on the roadside, everywhere. Once the job is done, they are like dust, they are thrown away from the city. Instead, I feel now the resources are very limited in the city, and rich bungalows have no right to exist within the city limits because they consume lot of water and lot of electricity, and as the population is increasing, I think we should have sky rises in the city which could accommodate all the people, and if you want luxurious building, you go outside the city limit and enjoy a good life. So, but the opposite is happening. All the good bungalows are accommodated within the city, all the middle class and the lower class, they are thrown outside the city because you go 40 miles, 50 miles looking for your house within the city. Now the city has expanded. Look at Chennai, it has expanded up to Mahabalipuram. On the other side, beyond 60 kilometers to Chengalpat. North it is not expanding because North happened to be earlier a pariah city. I am sorry to say this because the mayor of Chennai city used to be a Dalit earlier because it was thickly populated. So it is not expanding towards the north because you have to cross them and go beyond. So it is expanding southwards and eastward. So I think, in my opinion, a city, if it has to grow well and it has to be eco-friendly, so and the limited resources, it has to be well planned. At least the new places you pay attention, and also the gender factor into it.
The frightening thing is, going by what you said just now, that a natural disaster might actually sometimes play into the government's hands, because then they can get rid of all those people who are there in the coastal areas, or in the name of rehabilitation.
Yes,
it is a frightening thought. But we'll have to. This is a rather short session, I know, and if there are any questions, we'd be happy to take them. Yes, sir.
What's the time?
Sorry?
would like to read you the passage before the...
Hello. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And this is not a question, but you talked about the Madras, Chennai, and the self. The book title is Conversation with the City. So we should learn, And Tulsi ji, you have been a banker. I've also been a banker. I worked in 4 banks, but that is besides the point.
I worked in only one.
That's besides the point. So I'm Dr. Kailash Gupta. I started an NGO, the International Emergency Management Society India chapter. And this organization is a disaster management partner for the Jaipur Literature Festival. So your subtitle of the book is Conversation with the City. Just one. No, I'm just saying that, I want to, if anybody has got any suggestion, we have done all the planning, or if any disaster occurs, but if you got any idea, you kindly meet me and...
Excuse me.
This is only for questions, so when we say question hour, short question, not your opinion, ask the question from the panel who are on the stage to answer your question. Just a question. Who's next?
I'm a Chennaiite. I just wanted to find out from you guys if you really perceive that something has really changed about the spirit of Chennai. Because I believe it's an inherently selfish community. The people of Chennai are selfish. And I think during the floods, we saw an entirely different aspect of them.
Yeah, so I would think that's the true spirit of the city. It might seem that we are all very self-occupied, preoccupied with our own lives, which we are in the normal course of events. We don't often, increasingly we don't even know who our neighbors are, unlike earlier when everybody knew everybody on a particular street. But I think during the floods, story after story in every neighborhood of people helping utter strangers. And just yesterday, I don't know if the young couple that Sivakami and I met, they're here. And this gentleman was telling me a story. We meet in Jaipur and we're talking about Chennai, that his uncle was a particularly, not a very likable person, who had just been very harsh on a construction engineer who had built him a sump. He'd not been very nice to him. But when his home got flooded, because he was a bachelor and this contractor realized that he was alone, the contractor was the one who came back and gave him food. Now I think that to me is an example of human nature at its best, that sort of overlooks deficiencies in other people in the time of an emergency. Now you might say that maybe because it was an emergency, we saw this, but the fact that it existed, I think that gives us hope. Yeah.
Yes?
I think they decide.
Please stand up.
Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes, I am from Chennai also. I would like to know more about this North Madras being neglected. Have you done some research about that in your book? And the second question is, there is this constant problem of auto rickshaws, like having very different type of method of operating compared to other cities. So did you do some studies on both these things?
One of the people I interviewed for the book, and there's a whole chapter on him, is a civil engineer called Faizur Rahman. And Faizur grew up in North Chennai in an area called Washam and Pet. And in fact, when she was talking about, change in North Madras not happening, sometimes nostalgia, and we were talking about this too, it's good to have nostalgia because it means something in the past no longer exists. But in Faizur Rahman's case, he took me to the streets where he grew up. And every single point that we passed, he said, well, there's the bicycle shop where I hired cycle, a cycle for an hour, maybe at 50 paisa an hour. Today it's 8 rupees an hour. There's the pharmacy there. So his entire neighborhood that had those landmarks were still there. And we can't say that that was a good thing. In this context, it just showed that there was no development from the time he'd grown up there to now. So do read that chapter because it talks about that. And about auto rickshaws, oh, we love our auto rickshaws in Chennai, and in fact now there is a system where they have to operate with the meter on. And I have to tell you, I miss the old, haggling over fares and people who would refuse to take you in a certain direction because they didn't want to go there.
So we have one last question here in the front row.
Yeah, very short, very short. I'm Charun Nivedita from Chennai, a Tamil writer. I have only one question. Tell us something about Tasmak shops. In every street there is a Tasmak shop, and during floods, all the Tasmak shops were open. When drinking water was not available, alcohol was there everywhere.
You must explain what
Would
is
you like
Tasmak.
to?
No, you talk.
Oh, we have to explain first to the...
What is Tasmak?
Yeah,
They
what a
don't understand.
Tasmak shop. It's the government-owned, government-run liquor shops in Tamil Nadu. And obviously it has a huge, there's a lobby around that. So very often the debate at election time is whether these Tasmak shops ought to run or ought not to run. And indeed it is a shame that they were all open and running during the floods.
But I'm afraid, I think he wants to know something more from you about how these shops are being run so shabbily. Nobody can enter and have a decent, kind of atmosphere there, and so maybe you can.
Go ahead.
No.
But isn't it happy thing to know that the places of forgetting about what is happening are still existing.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's a good thing that alcohol shops run when nothing else
But I
does.
think
Actually,
if
it
you
is
ask
a
the
pity.
women-
It's an irony. All the schools are run by the private, and all the arak shops are run by the government.
Is there time
Yes,
for one
who's got a
No,
mic?
I'm sorry, we
Yeah, we're
have
done.
just 10 minutes to prepare for the next session. So
Fine.
if you want to say your closing remarks.
That's fine. Yeah. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience.
No, 10 minutes
and
there, so we can ask.
We can take
To the question or 10 minutes to
wrap
the.
up.
No, you don't have any, the session is finished, time is
okay.
finished.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
At the cost of repeating myself, then, thank you very much for being a wonderful audience, and thank you very much for
And
Sivakami
Tulsi will